What was the miss for? Can I live with it? We've done the work to understand what's good, what's great, what's exceptional, right? So if you're going to do emerging, you better be ready to do the work. And that's the only way you can discern ignorance versus malice versus, what's forgivable versus non-forgivable.
Superclusters is where we demystify the secrets, stories, and tactics behind the money that moves the venture capital world. Welcome back, Superclusters fans, and today is the season 4 season finale with the amazing Akkadians, Adam Marchick. There goes my alliteration game for today. But nevertheless, Adam is a partner at Akkadian Ventures and the head of Akkadian's seed strategy. I love the way that Akkadian describes their investing style, creative venture capital investing. For the uninitiated, Akkadian is spelled Akkadian. Prior to Akkadian, Adam was the director of investments at Emory University, where he's led their $2.5 billion investment in venture capital, investing about $200 million a year in venture funds and private companies. Before that, he's a serial founder, with his last business having sold to Headspace, where he eventually became their senior advisor there. He's also been a venture capitalist at both Bain Capital Ventures and Menlo Ventures, two of the leading investment institutions around. All questions are fair game today. But given that we'll run out of time before we run out of questions to talk about, we spend the most time on 3 things. 1, the lessons he's picked up from being around exceptional talent throughout his life, from Sheryl Sandberg at Facebook, now Meta, to Kevin Systrom of Instagram fame, to Joel Peterson as his professor. 2, how does one hit the ground running as an emerging LP? And 3, how and why Adam talks to at least 10 anti-portfolio companies when he's doing diligence on a manager. So there's something fascinating, and I'll be completely honest, I use the word fascinating quite often in this conversation, but I mean it every single time I use it. So there's something quite fascinating about having another Bay Area native on the show, and in so many ways, we are a rarity. And outside of the LP stuff that we'll get into, selfishly, I'm feeling fly with my countrymen, or I guess in this case, countymen here. Also, since we decided to wake up today and pick the same color palette to wear, I feel quite special. Nevertheless, without further ado, Adam, welcome to the show.
Great to be here. Thanks, David.
So there are many places we can start in the podcast. I'd love to invoke a name first, and you let me know where you were in your life. So I'd love to invoke the name Kathy Koo, if that rings any bell.
Of course.
Where were you in life when you first met her?
I was a sophomore in high school when I first met her. And, I grew up in Palo Alto, California. And it really is kind of an American dream story where my dad's from Wyoming, my mom's from Dallas. They met at Stanford. And growing up, I kind of knew I liked tech and business. And my parents were unbelievably supportive in putting me in front of those people. And I was a sophomore in high school, and I wanted to understand what work was. And Kathy Koo was running Stanford's Office of Technology Licensing. And I met with her, and she gave me an internship to basically file papers for Stanford's OTL for the summer.
Was there something that you think stood out? And you can leave this to speculation because this is from a while back, and obviously we haven't consulted with Kathy since, or maybe you have. Why do you think she hired you?
Well, I got to first give credit to my mom. So my mom was a pretty great person, and they're really good friends. And secondly, it's like, I think it was a low risk situation. I think I was getting like $5 an hour. And I think she said, low risk, and hopefully he'll do more benefit than harm. So, I felt like really, a lot of people have given me, as I described, like a chip in a chair from poker terms. Like, give me a shot, see what happens.
Was there anything you learned during your time at the OTL that helped you in your next chapter in your career?
Totally. One of the things, Stanford Office of Technology Licensing is like a top 3 in the world, not top 2. And so I saw how there were Stanford inventions that went on to generate billions of dollars for both the entrepreneurs and the university. And I think this was 35 years ago. I remember licensing a technology from a professor to Yamaha and just like seeing how research could go to commercialization when I was 16 years old.
Speaking of exceptional people, I do want to highlight a couple things that of people that you've been around. Because you're someone who's found himself in the company of world-class performers at a very young age, from Kevin Systrom of Instagram fame in your fraternity, to Joel Peterson and Mark Leslie as your professors, to Bob Tinker, CEO of Mobile Iron, who shared one of his greatest lessons to you when you were in your 8th month of building Kahuna, to Justin Osofsky as a boss during your internship at Facebook, who went on to become the COO of Instagram and the VP of Meta. I'm curious, what lessons did you learn about exceptional talent being around folks like Aki, Kevin Systrom, Justin Osofsky? Like, what did you learn?
And I'd add, Sheryl Sandberg encapsulated amazingly well, where I joined a month before Sheryl did, and there was a lunch. And she said, what's so freeing is when you can bring your personality to work. It's so much less cognitive load when you can be yourself. And Justin is uniquely amazing and uniquely quirky in the best ways. Like, I think I saw a picture of him dressed up as a llama for Halloween for Meta's Llama LLM. Right? Like, take your work seriously, not yourself, and bring your personality to work. And all of those people brought their personality to work. Especially, my 2 other bosses were Chamath and Tim Kendall. They both brought their personalities to work.
Was there, I'm curious, when you joined Meta, you joined a month before Sheryl did, and obviously there was a great anecdote where she says, like, it's great if you can bring your personality to work, right? It's so freeing to bring your personality to work. In that month leading up to it, were there moments, scenes per se, and like cut scenes, so to speak, in your life where you realized that this was the place to be, this was the place I was going to go far? And how did you express your personality while you were in your internship?
And first off, I was at Meta for 4 months, right? Yeah. So, but it just was a very unique place where I remember looking at because I was on the monetization team, and looking at the analytics and numbers and not believing they could be correct because they were so staggeringly exponential.
Yeah.
Like, when you're inside special companies, you pick up shared secrets that lead you to build the next great thing. And that can't be over focused on. Right? People that built Google, their next thing goes faster with more insight because of what they learned. Right? Meraki to Samsara, things like that.
So speaking of product and operational discipline, one of the things I found during the homework I had for this conversation, which in all fairness tickled all my brains in the right way, was I think in 2016, you put together a founder checklist. And in that, I think it was on Medium or something. And on the founder checklist, you had 8 things you had to figure out as someone was starting their company. Number 6 on that document, and I quote, drive first company culture document. To analogize that to funds, I'm curious, or just analogize to your own companies, what held true for you? What were some of the cultural pillars that you needed to have at Kahuna? And maybe even those that you see in GPs and firms today?
The first is ambitious and hardworking, because I don't think you accomplish anything without real work.
Yeah.
The second is naturally curious and wanting to figure things out, because the most innovative things are things where there's not an obvious blueprint. Sometimes it's about execution. But, one learning I had at Kahuna was I worked really hard to try and drive performance. And sometimes the right answer is not to push harder, but to step back and look at the bigger picture and figure out whether you should go a different route. Right. So that balance between figuring out the right path and then executing, that was a great learning. And I also look for that.
Do you have any examples of when it is a good time to put the pedal to the metal and moments where, take your foot off the gas pedal? Or how do you discern between the fine line between the two?
Yeah. A perfect example was we hit product market fit for Kahuna kind of year 3. And it was probably the most fun I've ever had in a work environment where, we closed Hotel Tonight, then Weather Channel, then Yahoo, then DraftKings, then Overstock, the New York Times, then, 10 others in the span of 7 months. And when you have something that the world wants, keep running, right? And lean into it. And I think that's a lot of what Reid Hoffman's blitz scaling is about. The other time, kind of year 5, we really hit technical debt, and it made things harder, and it caused customer issues. And again, I was like, hey, let's just push through it. Let's push through it. When in reality, I should have kind of did a hard stop, figure out how to secure the base. I had to lay off 20 salespeople. That was not fun. I should have not hired them and instead been more thoughtful about, re-engineering.
To take a step back, maybe, I'm curious about your first investment, particularly, and I don't know if you'll count it as your first investment, but I would probably say is your first investment. 1998. You bought 10 shares of Dell stock with your first paycheck. I don't know if memory has atrophied over all this time, its last score or in a quarter of years, but if you remember, what was your rationale for buying Dell stock at the time?
Yeah. Well, it's actually a good through line where it happened because I was in the aeronautics lab at Stanford, coding in MATLAB on a Dell machine, and it felt like magic. It was a purely product-driven investment where this Dell workstation is super powerful and enables doing very cool things. I bet other people will want to use these as well. So again, I was in a unique place, Stanford's aeronautics lab, doing unique things where we were doing attitude determination. It used to be $400K with a gyro. We were doing it in software for $4,000. So like an innovation, and I was using a vital tool to do it, right? So it was a very authentic but uninformed way to buy a stock.
How do you feel about your first investment? Like, did you feel moments of how after you made that investment, did you watch the stock market pretty closely, or was it like set and forget? I'll check it in 10 years.
Well, it was like 98, so everyone felt like a genius, right? Right. So it worked out well through none of my analysis. So it felt that one was an easy one. There's other that have been really hard, where it's I think I'm right, but no one agrees with me. And I'm losing a bunch of money. What am I going to do? That was not one of them.
I'm curious if you remember, what was that path to get there? Let's say you're day one at Emory. What were the things you did to build up expertise and knowledge to eventually become the larger than life figure that you are today?
I think the larger life, I think you're literally, which I'm working on. Teasing.
No, that's not true.
Working on it. So I will, again, this spirit of mentee mentorship, I knew that to really learn and to be good at this job, I had to figure out who are my Fab Five. So I went to think about who are the 5 LPs I think are really good at their job in venture. And one of them was Nate, so that was easy.
Mm-hmm.
Another was Mel at TrueBridge. So I cold emailed him.
Okay.
And said like, hey, would you be willing to like advise me? And 4 years later, he's been a wonderful mentor. And just that process of being open to learning from great people. That was like core. And then the next is lots of reps. There's no better learning than doing and analyzing how you did, what was good, what could be improved.
How did you come up with the list of Fab Five? Like, did you just ask Nate, like, Nate, who do you respect? I need like.
No, it was a combo of, again, talking to GPs and be like, who's your best LP? Why? And triangulating. What have they done for you? Why was it impactful?
What were some of the answers that you got, if you remember, at that time? Like, not in terms of names, but in terms of like, what they did, how are they impactful?
One of them, this was Mel of believing in me early, and then also and believing in a GP early, and also figuring out a better mousetrap, which for Mel was the Midas list, which really was a better mousetrap as TrueBridge was growing. Another, which was great advice I got from Mike and Sunil at Amplify, was, hey, be really transparent and even document and share your co-invest criteria. Because so many LPs say, I want to do co-invests, and then you show them one and they pass. And we don't know why, and they don't know why. And we just waste a bunch of time.
What were some of your co-invest criteria at that time when you're building that level of transparency?
So part of it is there's the platform you're trying to work through from in your OKRs. So I'm a big believer in OKRs. I think, and I feel like people should behave rationally. And so figuring out what are the rational drivers of things. And for Emory, it's a forever institution. Their Utopia is doing 12% IRR every year for 90 years. Like that means everything's well funded. And like the ship is secure, right? Protect the base. They're serving a university and a hospital system, having cash on hand. So their forever institutions is the number one priority. So venture is like the niche high octane portion of the endowment. And then co-invest is even the more nichier high octane. And so I was trying to underwrite a 5X with an upside, but like, feel good about a 5X, not a 10X, not a 20X, on a company that we feel already hit product market fit, that wasn't going to have too many shocks to the system along the way, where things were kind of humming versus like 2 to 3 pivots from victory.
Gotcha. And when you co-invest, this might be a pretty dumb question, so call me out on my rookiness if so. Was it to double down on like maybe a fund manager's pro rata rights, or was it just like a net new commitment into a company that we were trying to build a relationship from scratch?
It's the first thing. And also I have a different filter and goal at Akkadian, but they're a lot of the same tenets. To answer your question, if I was seeing a deal net new, why am I so lucky? So it's about places where we thought we had information and relationship advantages. And
that probably bleeds into you've talked to them maybe at AGMs or otherwise at events. You've seen it in reports of how they've been growing. And at some point you're like, this makes a lot of sense for us to pull the trigger.
I'll give like examples. Like Netscope, 4 years of watching them execute. Very obvious. Applied Intuition, met them at an AGM. Very obvious. We should, for an endowment doing co-invests, you should never squint. Because like the goal is not to do one great small co-invest. It's $10 billion endowment. Compound, right?
How did you guys think about breaking down the co-investment strategy versus the fund to fund strategy? Like, was it a 50-50 distribution? How did you think about that?
That's great. And I think one of the things when I got to endowments, everyone talked about the generalist model. I see virtue in it. I think it breaks down quickly. And partially, the co-invest strategy for private equity is and should be very different from the co-invest strategy of venture capital.
Right.
In private equity, lots of times a manager is doing something perfectly on scope, perfectly in their wheelhouse, but needs a bigger check and is the only person investing, right? Hence, perfect spot for co-invest. And Bo at Emory is point for private equity. I was point for venture.
Mm-hmm.
For venture, like that strategy would be a massive money loser, right? Where you do every deal and only do the deals where it's a massive check. Like usually it's because the manager is going off spec or caught it too late.
You also teased that what you do now at Akkadian is similar but different. In what ways does it differ? In what ways is it similar?
So the first thing is we're in the business of partnering with exceptional people in venture.
Yeah.
And our flagship fund is a venture secondaries fund. And think we do venture growth, like the companies have 10 million plus of ARR. We just have much better entry pricing because we work with lots of people on the cap table and don't wait for rounds. We get conviction in a company, we figure out how to invest in it. And all credit to Ben, Mike, and the larger Akkadian team on crafting and evolving that over 16 years. I'm head of our seed strategy, where we are focused on delivering complete and performant seed portfolios. And I can't share too much, but again, it's about working with great people, fund managers and founders.
One of the things I love when you were describing investing in funds was you were investing in a blind pool of human potential. And that phrase sits rent-free in my mind so much. Because you're completely right. And I couldn't find a better way to describe what investing in funds are in fairness. So I'm curious for you, across your years of experience, what is it like underwriting a blind pool of human potential? Like, how do you evaluate human potential?
So it's great. And I think the most important of that is to bring a level of humility with that, where I compared it to being a B-round venture investor, where you have trend lines and cohort data and churn analysis and customer calls on a company that you're entering into. In theory, when you're investing in a new fund, there are no assets besides the people. There's lots of great institutional meat and potatoes that is required to be good at fund investing. And there are lots of great people that can share on that. I think what I will add, which I think is unique, is, people talk about the verbs, see, pick, win, then support, and then exit. But on the see, pick, win, I think the unique augment, which we do, which I think is different in the market, is on the win verb. And it comes authentically where, when I was a founder, I had 5 seed term sheets. Who'd I pick? Why'd I pick them? Who was I glad I picked? Who was I wish I didn't picked? I think I had 17 VC funds invested in me. There's 3 I rep. Who and why those 3? And the diligence and understanding and triangulation and flow to separate the 3 from the 17, that's part of the underwriting work that's augmentary that I think is different. Because that leads to NPS, and then the best next investment for a fund 3 is a fund 1 founder intro or read or next act.
How are you assessing this? Right? How are you, like, I assume you're doing your diligence, you're doing your reference checks and all that. Most founders are not incented to speak ill of their investors. Are there other things you're looking, telltale signs of founder NPS, that you would ask? Like, or are there certain questions you would specifically frame when you're doing the reference checks with founders?
There is, but part of it is you're not doing reference calls with people you just met. For example, I was doing a reference on a GP, and the reference was a business school classmate I've been friends with for 10 years. That was his CEO 6 years ago. That's a very different conversation than a first conversation.
They're obviously, like, you're predisposed, first of all, as we mentioned earlier already, to exceptional talent, and you have a wealth of connections already. If someone were to build up that network as let's say a family office or an LP from scratch in the venture program, where would you recommend people start?
It's about doing the reps and being actually helpful, right? That one of the things I love about working at Akkadian is we have 18 different ways to collaborate with an emerging manager. It's not just fund investing.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe we do a B round together, or we buy some common together, or we talk about a company together. So you can, it's about interactions and actually helping a founder or a manager that puts you in their trust tree.
That makes sense. Because I'm assuming not everyone can go to B school with the same incredible people. Although if you find yourself at Stanford, Harvard, Penn, like Wharton, your batting averages should be pretty high.
Well, in theory, YC says those people are the worst founders, right? So maybe that's not a good thing that I went to those schools,
but they might be good operators.
School. Yeah, but again, they're like, it's funny. It's I want to. What's like a key thing where again, when I started Kahuna, I was a B school ex VC. I'm like, cool. If that's why you want to neg me, like, okay, like, should I, it's like, it's silly when people make broad sweeping strokes. That's more just tongue in cheek of, the fact that I went to Stanford GSP is a negative if I try and start a company.
Positive in many other industries.
Yeah. But again, it's like a venture's made on the exception, not the rule, right?
Yeah. It's also, I will say, venture has amalgamated closer to some semblance of rules. There, in the last couple of years, there's been this excitement around college dropouts. There's been yes, a couple of our outlier successes in history happened to be college dropouts. But also, I will say, there's a very different, like, to get in Harvard versus to get in to get in Berkeley. I went to Berkeley. Like, I can dunk on Berkeley. To get in Harvard versus to get in Berkeley is two very different, like, echelons of just, like, talent, in my opinion. I love Berkeley. Don't get me wrong. I've met some incredible people there.
My co-founder, Alex, in Berkeley. I can't wait to send him this clip. It's great.
I love Berkeley. I worked hard to get there. But to that same third, I was rejected by Harvard. So maybe it's like grass is greener on the other side. That said, there is a difference between a Harvard and a trade school, like dropping out, so to speak. So people seem to amalgamate to these rules, not saying that these rules are good. I don't even know where I'm going with this, to be completely honest. Maybe just take a step back on sourcing or seeing, picking, winning that you mentioned earlier. One of my favorite things at the event in which we met that you said, you said something quite interesting about diligence, right? You talked about the anti-portfolios and you would do diligence on anti-portfolios. And I'm going to misquote, paraphrase what you said at the event, but it was that you typically call up 10 anti-portfolio companies that these GPs missed on investing. And your goal is to simply understand in terms of breakdown, did they not see it? Did they not pick it? Or did they not win it? And so I'm curious, once you have that breakdown, how do you dissect the information after?
Yeah, a lot of it is, triangulation and assessing, around, okay, can I live with the miss? What was the miss for? Can I live with it? Again, the importance of triangulation. This is where, if you're going to invest in emerging, you better do the work.
Yeah.
We got 150 small funds inbound to us this year for the Raise conference.
Amazing.
I have evaluated all of them. Like, we've done the work to understand what's good, what's great, what's exceptional.
Right.
Right. So if you're going to do emerging, you better be ready to do the work. And that's the only way you can discern when you're doing those anti-portfolio calls, what's ignorance versus malice versus, what's forgivable versus non-forgivable.
I'm curious, where do you go to source these anti-portfolio companies? Is it purely like, let's say you're diligencing a manager doing healthcare, for example, right? Are you just looking at the major healthcare companies that have come to business during their vintages, their earlier vintages, or are there other ways you're assessing anti-portfolio? Are you just asking them, hey, do you have references of companies you've passed on?
Yeah, I don't really ask them because part of it I'm trying to get a blind reference, right?
Right. Off-list references are the best.
A lot of it is like cloning the founders they've invested in and be like, who's like this person that they didn't invest in? And or what A and B round companies are doing well in their market.
I'll be honest, after I learned it from you, I was like, oh, yeah, I guess I'll do that for all the other managers I invest in, which I didn't start doing until part of the reason for the podcast and meeting awesome people like yourself is I pick up practices that I work into my own rotation. Speaking of the world of AI stuff and all, I'll take a responsibility if this hits a dead end. There's a lot of talk on the AI CEO these days, that's driving down the cost of decision making, the AI budget going after the labor budget instead of the SaaS budget, or the idea that venture firms can be run algorithmically, the metaphoric, possibly quite literal 10,000 company incubator. Is there anything for you in the age of intelligence, to quote maybe Sam Altman in his fairly recent blog post, is there anything that excites you or scares you about the future of venture today?
Well, first, venture is always made on the exception, right? The average venture firm is mediocre, and that will always be the case, right? So venture is alive and well because it's the exception of venture that drives venture. And through all the ups, downs, there is still an exceptional cohort of venture capital that has been nothing but up and to the right. What scared me about crypto was there was no product market fit and engagement. Going back to Facebook's engagement metrics were what was so awe-inspiring. Like, engagement leads to revenue. And so there are these things valued super highly with no engagement.
Yeah.
Right. And so AI is alive and well because of the engagement numbers, which lead to revenue numbers. And, if I think about it's a tectonic shift, but it's similar that my second tech job was at iBeam Broadcasting in 1998, where my first job was to manage the network operations center, which was the 100 computers hosting internet video. Well, then AWS came along and NOCs were obsolete, right? This is just another layer of abstraction that's going to enable faster innovation. And I'm excited to see what is built. I was just on the phone with one of the really interesting conversations around AI. Is AI most compelling as an out-of-loop analytics like Gong, an in-loop intelligence like Microsoft Copilot, or as an agent you hire as an analyst? And the answer is probably all three, but depends on the application.
I also want to be cognizant of time here. And as we prepare for a curtain call, if we can take ourselves away from the world of venture LP for now and just go back to Adam as a human being. I call these quick fire round questions. I need a better name for it. So if you can help me find a better name for this set of questions, by all means. So start things off. Half a decade ago, you wrote a really interesting blog post with a rather provocative title: How to Raise Money from Sequoia Capital, Go to a Stanford Football Game. What's the equivalent for breaking into the venture industry, maybe as an LP, excluding Raise? Raise is phenomenal. So a shout out to the LPs out there today listening to this. Raise is a phenomenal conference that happens in the fall of every year, if I remember correctly. Then you get to meet so many different kinds of LPs allocating towards venture, as well as, you have a great selection committee that picks, like, with a finer tooth comb about all these amazing GPs in general. But what games, events, communities should emerging LPs hang out in? That's the equivalent of the Stanford Football Game.
Yeah, part of it is, I want to be very careful not to just talk about ivory towers as like everyone should do this, right? Like, Stanford football is general admission, so anyone can go. And it literally was at, our tailgate that I randomly ran into Maynard Webb that led to like the Sequoia A-round discussion. Anyone go, right? So it's like you should go to Stanford game, not a Berkeley one, right? Maybe they'll meet Kevin at Kabam, at the Berkeley one, right? So
that's true. Maybe when Stanford goes against Berkeley,
right? I'd harken back to like, a lot of people want to give you a chip in a chair.
Yeah.
Like, I'll go to Nick Shalik, who's the co-head of Ribbit, that when he was 22 at Yale's endowment office, but the most junior person there, cold emailed Josh at First Round Capital, and that led to $1 billion of profit for Yale, right? Now, if we extract the Yale ivory tower, there are a lot of fun people without a platform that are just, and LPs that are just nice and helpful.
Yeah.
Like I would do Third Bell Capital, Ed Hutchinson. Nice, helpful, thoughtful. He's getting great access, right? People want to give you a chip into the chair.
You may have single-handedly opened the floodgates on Ed's inbox.
Good. I hope to laugh with him soon. He's in North Carolina. He's awesome. Great guy.
You guys are close enough geographically to each other as well.
Yeah. He can drive up, and talk to me about it.
That's true. He'd be like, for some reason, I've been getting all these inbound emails saying that they heard something about me on a podcast with Adam. That's you. To switch gears a little bit, as someone who's once owned both an Amazon Echo and a Google Home within 8 feet from each other, where do you see the world going? Is it more visual interfaces, or is it voice, audio? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, like, Amazon Alexa dropped the ball in epic proportions, right? Like, it should have been ChatGPT. It should have been OpenAI. They had a 9-year head start. First off, inbound voice is a killer app. That was like in our conversation, the amount of note-taking software companies at over 40 million ARR is astounding. That is an AI killer app.
Yeah.
Right. So voice is having its golden moment. I'd say I was much on inbound, but also on, customer service, order taking, voice calls for customer service. Also, voice is having its golden moment.
Yeah.
I use Perplexity and ChatGPT via text just because I work next to my wife sometimes and I'm annoying. So less talking is better, right? So there's just like a lot of things where nonverbal, like that was like, what's that wearable where you had to talk to it and look like you were talking to yourself?
Humane.
Right? Like, I think there are a lot of times where you don't want to be vocal.
I'm also a person who hates the sound of my own voice, so it's actually quite a travesty when I'm editing or helping edit this podcast. Thank God I have Tyler who really does most of the editing, but every so often he sends me a clip and he's like, "Hey, David, what do you think about your own voice?" I'm like, "Nope, don't want to hear it," but yeah, I guess I have to. Yeah. Maybe as the last question over here, taking a really longer step back from venture and all, but as someone who once started a company after getting a call on your sabbatical skiing in Lake Tahoe, the first vacation you took in then 8 years, how do you think about maintaining relationships in life?
It's good. It's interesting. I am of a mindset where I email, call, and text my friends probably too much, just because they have helped me through amazing things up and down. And I have three friends from high school, and we do an annual trip religiously, and they're still very close. So I've just gotten a lot of benefit from long-term relationships, and I encourage you to. I think Harry Stebbins talked about call your mom, call your dad, just make the call, make the text. And even if they don't pick up because something's going on, like just do it for you, right? But then also a firm understanding that people are busy. And I have a 4 and a 2-year-old. I don't have any hobbies. Like, I don't have any dalliances, right? Like, maybe when my kids are in high school, I'll go back to like my favorite thing, which is going to live sports, but that's not where I am right now, right? And so just being like understanding of where people are and knowing that, when the chips are down and someone calls you needing something, what else is more important in the world than that? So like that understanding of interaction versus just like being there for people, whether or not you've talked in a long time.
I need to do a lot more of that. I'm trying to do more of that because it's not always in my habitual cycles to do so. But one of the ways I started doing so, and I'm curious on your knee-jerk reaction to it, is I have a habit tracker that I just keep track of. Like, obviously, it's like drink 7 cups of water, exercise, get some vitamin D, go outside, things like that. But one of the things I recently added on, which is actually I added February of this year. This podcast might go out in 2025, beginning of 2025. So I guess February last year, where I added a new column to the habit tracker, which was send one thank you note every single day. And it is something that I do religiously every single day. Doesn't matter who it is. Could be to my parents, could be to someone I haven't caught up with in a very long time, could be a mentor of mine that I haven't talked to in like 8 years. That's the goal. And it has helped me rebuild and also maintain a lot of relationships that I've let atrophy for too long. And that's on me.
Even if it's 2 sentence email, right?
Yeah.
And you don't even care if they respond, right? But we're all here because people have been unnaturally nice to us. And to not recognize that and cherish that is your own detriment.
There is no better place to have that mic drop. And at the end of the episode. So maybe as one last thing, you're obviously you're on Medium, you're on LinkedIn, you're on Twitter, you have your email. Where's the best place for people to reach out? Like, let's say they're an LP thinking through like, hey, you know what? I'm thinking through my venture strategy. Adam's got plenty of miles on his odometer on that. If they have follow-up questions because I didn't ask the right questions during this interview, where should people reach out to you on?
LinkedIn or adam@akkadian.vc.
I love it. Adam, thank you so much. Thank you for humoring all the questions I've thrown your way. Some of it might be a little bit more like, hard swings out of left field, but thank you so much.
It's a lot of fun. Thanks, David.
Well, until the next time, Superclusters, talk soon.
Right. So if you're going to do emerging, you better be ready to do the work.
I want to give a special shout out to today's sponsor, Alchemist Accelerator. Backed by the likes of Coastal Ventures, Mayfield, Salesforce, just to name a few, Alchemist is the top B2B startup accelerator that's been around since 2012, backing founders from day one. And if you've been around for 12 years and running laser focused only on one industry, you build this incredible set of flywheels, and positive feedback loop is absolutely insane. We back the best enterprise talent who go on to change the world in which we live in, who then come back to their hometown, coach, and mentor the next generation of world-class enterprise talent. And don't take it just from me. Alchemist has backed the likes of LaunchDarkly, Rigetti, Privacera, MoEngage, FarmWise, just to name a few, many of which who have come back as mentors and coaches for the current classes of Alchemist. If you're curious and want to get more involved in the Alchemist ecosystem, check out alchemistaccelerator.com/superclusters. That's an S at the beginning, an S at the end, and we'll include the link in the show notes below. Till next, stay awesome. David from Post here, and if you're tuning in from Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever podcasts find your ear, it'd mean the world to me if you left a review. For those from the YouTube universe, let me know if you agree or disagree in the comments, and it'd mean a lot to me if you could share this episode with just one other person who'd get a kick out of today's topics. I'm on the road to publishing to at least 100 episodes of Superclusters, so every comment, question. Review helps me make this experience more helpful, exciting, and fun for you. And lastly, I want to share a quick disclaimer. The views expressed in this episode are for informational purposes only and are solely the views of myself and the guest alone. They are not representative of Alchemist Accelerator. None of the views expressed herein constitute legal, investment, business, or tax advice. Any allusions or references to funds or companies are for illustrative purposes only and should not be relied upon as investment recommendations. Consult a professional investment advisor prior to making any investment decisions. And that's all from me. See you on the next.